Yo, everybody, another episode of the MindBody Marathon. And on today's show, we are going to talk about some Q&As. So we are all providers. We are all sports physicians, and Zach's a sports massage therapist. And so here, these are some common questions we get from patients and some things that we just hear fairly consistently. We're going to kind of discuss them and hopefully give you some good insights and some points. On today's show is, to my right, Zach Goulet, our resident massage therapist. And left is Matt Pisanelli, sports chiro. And I'm Dr. Leo, sports chiro as well. And so let's get started. And so what do you think? You want to ask the first one?
I'm gonna go right off the bat with a heavy one here.
Okay.
So it's with the common theme of anything that we deal with in here of hamstrings.
I have a whole episode on hamstrings.
Oh, it's amazing. So I think the number one question that I always get whenever I work on hamstrings, and let's say like somebody comes in and they didn't want that like primarily addressed, but it's like a secondary thing, and they feel how tight they are, how sensitive they are, and they go, oh, because I have tight hamstrings, do I need to stretch more? Like, do I need to stretch my hamstrings? Like I probably need to do more stretching. What do you think?
Yeah, a lot of people beat themselves up on that.
They really do.
Like, oh, I don't stretch enough. My hamstrings are always tight.
They really do. And the way that I answer it, I think a lot of these questions that we're going to ask today are from patients are all kind of like dependent upon them and what their condition is. But I think generally speaking with this question, I don't believe in stretching the hamstrings statically. I think more mobility, more like active stretching,
like dynamic stuff,
more dynamic stuff, or like
so that's how you would answer the question.
Yeah, because and then I always use the analogy of a car, where like especially if like they're a healthy person, so like they didn't come in with a primary complaint of hamstring, I would always say, like, you should look at your body like a car, where like you don't want to stretch out the shocks of a car because you feel like that's going to give you more.
Dude, it'd be like that old school Cadillac. You hit a bump and it's like,
yeah, that boat, just that boat in the road. Yeah. So
that's a good answer.
That's how
hey, well, here's the thing. So, if you kind of go back to the hamstring episode a couple weeks ago, the hamstrings are in running primarily just designed, and all sports can have some component of running in it, except for darts and bowling and hand grenades, unless you're running away from them. They're gonna, they basically just have to sort of guide the leg to under the center of mass. And so all they really have to be able to do is just quickly, stretch and then contract. So they don't really need to be strong, and they don't really need to be overly flexible either, because you don't want a rubber band that's too loose, because then you won't be able to get that free elastic energy to snap down. And so many patients would be like, well, I can't touch my toes. And I'm like, great. So welcome to being a world-class runner. Like, that's pretty common, actually.
Right.
A tighter hamstring can produce a little bit more force, and it doesn't have to be overly strengthened. Now, in my assessment, Matt probably will have some opinions on this, but when people are like, my hamstrings are tight, I immediately don't even think of the hamstrings. I just think their back is probably tight.
Same.
If you do a forward fold to assess your hamstring, say you do a forward fold to bend down to reach down to touch your toes, and you feel your hamstrings are tight, it's because your hamstrings are being asked to stretch farther than they want to. But why are they being asked to stretch farther than they want to? Because other tissue is tight around it. Like, say when you fold forward, you're actually stretching the back too, but say the back was stiff and you can't flex through the back, then all of a sudden you're going to ask the hamstrings to do more flexion than they want. So you'll perception wise feel the hamstrings more.
Yeah.
So it's not actually the hamstrings.
You're just hinging at the hip as opposed to flexing through the whole curvature of your back.
Yeah. So you're not flexing the low back as well, or the mid back, and you're just hinging at the hip, like Matt said. So that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah. I'd look at it from a strength side of things, well, especially because we see a lot of runners, more of an endurance of strength than it is like a single, like one single leg,
like a rep max.
Like that. Yeah. So a lot of the times the hamstring will become perceived tight because it gets fatigued, and that's a difference between a weakness. So, I mean, like, everybody can go to the gym and do a leg curl where you sit on a machine and you bend your, heel back towards your buttock. And you're going to have strength. Most people are going to have anywhere from probably 50 to 90 pounds easily done, but do that repeatedly over time, and you're going to fatigue very quickly, even in 10, a set of 10. And
Yeah,
then it's just going to get tight because it's no longer capable of performing the task.
Well, that's the thing. So if you're running and you're running in such a way that you're loading your hamstring more than it's designed to be loaded, then yes, it will peter out and fatigue. So you'll feel it more. So the tissue that you often feel is basically the tissue that is being asked to do too much.
Yeah.
So like say we were all workers in a room and Zach's working overtime and me and Matt are being lazy. Who's going to complain to the boss?
Me.
The overtime worker.
Yeah.
The two lazy people are getting away with murder, so they're not going to complain.
Right.
So if you feel the hamstrings, you're probably using the hamstrings too much.
Yeah.
So
I would agree.
it's just a simple concept.
Right.
So it's better to then shift the focus to not necessarily just stretch the hamstrings more. That doesn't make any sense. So I wouldn't like tell Zach to not work less or to work less, because then nobody gets work done. The better option is to have Zach work a little less and then have us two work more and then bring everybody up to snuff so that we're all working equally. That's the right option. The option is to not shut down whatever we feel.
Yeah. And I would say the other thing, with hamstring stuff is neurological. Nerve tension of the sciatic nerve is probably my number one reason why the hamstrings feel tight.
Correct. I love that idea. So basically the concept there being that the sciatic nerve comes from the buttock, obviously a low back through the buttock. And if you look at an anatomy picture of the hamstring, I'll put this up for people that are watching. In the center of the hamstring, the muscle sort of bifurcates and splits out to two common tendons. There's obviously 3 hamstrings, but splits out to 2 common tendons. When it splits, the sciatic nerve is very prominent there, and it can often just literally get stuck in that fascial sling. So when people sort of slump forward to assess their, the length of their hamstring, it often isn't even the muscle that's tight. It's the fact that the nerve can't slide through it. And in fact, if you're running marathons and you often get like calf cramps, it's almost always tension in the sciatic nerve of the hamstring. It's not even like it can obviously be metabolic and, all that sort of stuff. But honestly, a lot of times if you do metabolic things and you're like fixing the hydration and electrolytes, it's probably just the freaking nerve.
Yeah.
Right.
So
what were we going to say?
Well, to kind of go off of the hamstrings, but in a different capacity, and you kind of elaborated on it a little bit more. And I want to know what you guys think about this, because like a great example would be an athlete that I saw on Monday, and she was having shin pain. Like she said, like, I had a stress fracture before. I feel like it's starting to come on again. And so I'm like, well, I don't really want to treat it because I don't want to destabilize it. But I go, just stand up. I go, look at your foot. And she's like super pronated. And I'm like, this isn't a result of the ankle. The ankle is weak, but there's probably dysfunction further up the chain. And so from that, like what you were saying, like, if there's hamstring tightness, it's probably not coming directly from the hamstring. And I'm of the belief as well, like as you start to get lower in the extremity and there's dysfunction in that lower extremity, it's probably not coming from that weakness, and it's probably coming from either hip, back, whatever, Yeah,
I love this. And if somebody watches themselves run or has video of it or standing and they see pronation in a foot, meaning the ankle and the foot are sort of rolling in a little bit more, like 9 times out of 10, that's the side of the tighter hip flexor, right? Because the psoas, meaning your main hip flexor, comes down to the front of the hip and inserts on the medial part of the front of the hip, or the inside part of the front of the hip on the lesser trochanter. If that muscle is not designed, or if that muscle is being recruited as a stabilizer and not a primary hip flexor, then it won't hold the femur steady, and it allows the femur to internally rotate, which then pronates the foot. And the way to fix it is just hip and back stuff.
Right.
But it's not a foot conversation. So if somebody puts you in an orthotic, they're probably not looking farther up the chain. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And just to kind of go off of what you just said, Leo, earlier on about muscle cramps in the calf. I mean, we didn't work up in Cleveland, or just south of Cleveland. So we just had Columbus, which is another city in Ohio. So we just had the Columbus Marathon. I had 4 patients from the Columbus Marathon cramp up
in the calves.
Yep, right in the calf, right along the distribution of the tibial.
I know. I
nerve.
always think like, you know, something bit me, like, you know,
Yeah.
from Forrest Gump.
Yeah. But and again, they're like, oh, did I tear something? I'm like, no, it's just right along the tibial branch, which branches off the sciatic nerve, you know, into the calf. And I can show them right on, I have a nerve chart. And
Yeah. So if you look at the calf, so if we think of the calf as like a triangle, you know, you have your coming down to the Achilles as a point and the upper two portions as the gastroc. If in the center of that triangle, you get a cramp, that's a nerve. From now to the end of time, that's a nerve. That's not a tight muscle. The muscle is restricted around the nerve, but the pain is actually coming from the nerve being caught. So if that's the case and you're running and you get a cramp there, you need to get that nerve to release. You need to consult our YouTube page or consult a physician or somebody and get that nerve to release. Same thing with the hamstring. If the hamstring pulls in the center of the hamstring near that bifurcation that I alluded to, that's a nerve. However, if you get cramps on the sides of the hamstring on the triangle portion, that's a calf cramp. That's a genuine calf cramp, and they do happen. And it's probably metabolic, or it's probably that you're shutting down your glutes and you're not able to sufficiently extend your thigh back. And so you're kind of flicking from the knee down and running very calf dominant. And so oftentimes in those moments, if you just focused, even in the race, on contracting your glutes and pushing your glutes forward, then that'll take pressure off the calf.
I think if you go to Amazon and type in "faster without fail," you'll get an in-depth description of all of this.
That is in the book. That is in the book. That is true. I'll put it in the show notes.
So one of the questions that I get all the time is how long and what are the best couple of exercises to do warming up for an activity?
Yeah, like just any activity, like a race or something.
I mean, even I have a
pickleball.
Like, what's the best couple of things to do, from a warm up side of things?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I like it. So I'll take that first. I think at a primary, you have to focus on the trunk activation. So I would do, in those situations, I would always do some sort of back extension work, like press-ups that can relieve neurological tension down the legs. Then I would make sure you activate the muscles of the hip. So with like leg swings, high fire hydrants, simple clams, that kind of stuff to activate specifically the back part of the hip. And then with regards to the sports where you're involving the arms, then you want to do some rotator cuff stuff, some rotator cuff warming up exercises as well. So if you go early to like a football or baseball game, you'll see a lot of guys doing like some rotator cuff movements. So I think that would be beneficial as well. And then if you're running, then I think it's a minimum you need to do a little bit of bounding, a little bit of plyometrics, a little bit of things that are going to create the tendon elasticity so you're not so stiff to start. So if say you're running a major marathon, you're like running the New York City Marathon, and you're stuck in a corral for like 2 hours, basically try to be as loose and, some bounds, some hops, some knee, basically driving the knees up and that kind of stuff. Trying to do some leg swings, all those sort of things to just warm up the body and get the hips to activate. And then even do some standing extensions where you sort of extend back to just get that mechanic, because you're probably not going to be able to get on the ground and sort of do those movements. But I think those are probably some of the more important ones.
Put them right by the porta potties, right? Or while they're waiting for
and also if you're running New York, I learned recently, you do not want to be on the lower level. So at all costs, try to get on the upper level because people pee off the bridge on the upper level.
It's like when we're doing your warm-ups.
And the wind blowing, dude. Everybody's getting that shower.
Yeah, I like with that, and this kind of goes into a question that I had written down is like, I feel like patients tend to want more rather than quality. Like, what do I need to be doing more? Like, oh, I got this. Like, what should I be doing more? I'm already doing this. I'm already doing. And it's like, no, hold on, wait.
Yeah, let's take away things.
Let's take away things. Let's get good quality. And yeah, it's like you don't need to spend 30 minutes doing a bunch of different warm-ups, especially like if you're just kind of like the weekend warrior type person. But you need to get at least like a core, like I believe like 4 to 5 different things that kind of target those different areas for whatever sport that is. So then you're out there and just like enjoying yourself. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you.
Well, when I had him on the episode, he talked about how, like, this was my old college coach, and he would talk about how the East Africans would do like a dance. they would sort of like a rocket kick their legs up and snap their fingers and clap them under their thighs. So that teaches sort of a rhythm, coordination, and obviously is loosening up the muscle. They're getting into sort of a meditative flow state. I think that's beautiful.
I think that's and you can find that stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, you can find out some East African warm-up drills.
Yeah, they're fun.
What would you say, Matt?
I tell a lot of patients to work on abdominal breathing right beforehand. One, it helps calm nerves. How many people have race anxiety? But two, you really get the diaphragm to start to excursion like downward, and that's going to help with core stability. And especially then if they have that mindset going into it, then I relay the information of like when you're hitting the wall or something goes bad to go back to it. Because then again, if you can activate the diaphragm and compress in through like the abdomen, that stabilizes the spine, that turns off the QLs, the hip flexors from having to do that. And then you can regain some of that power that you're losing.
When would you incorporate that?
I mean, you should start it. I mean,
you can do it on the line when you're waiting.
Yeah.
Just stand. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times too, some high school kids will talk about, they get cramps in the last mile of like a 5K and stuff. So any coaches or athletes out there, if that's the case, you do want to make sure that your heart rate is very low on the start line. You should be very calm. You should be very, very relaxed. You should really honestly get it pretty darn low towards your resting heart rate. You should have sufficient, decent tidal breathing. You shouldn't be like shallow breathing, like you're like basically like nervous. You need to be like real relaxed, real deep breath ins and outs. And then that'll stave off that cramp. And then what Matt's mentioning is a lot of times when you breathe from the upper lobes of the lung, then you're not able to sufficiently clear the lower lobes, and that creates a side stitch. And so if you mechanically wake up the diaphragm, then you're going to be more likely to avoid that in the race.
And I mean, then we could have a whole discussion on the vagus nerve and
the stimulation of the vagus. Yeah.
With just decreasing stress and anxiety, muscle tone, heart rate, blood pressure, everything. So
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff out there now. Like when have you ever talked about the vagus nerve? Like when you were running at your peak, like when did you ever think about that? Like there's just so much research out there now. There's so much.
Yeah. We'll share some insight on stuff that vagus nerve stuff.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah.
Well, isn't it like, the vagus nerve is like your mind gut connection.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you stimulate it, then you're obviously having better communication within your body. And
the vagus means it's the 10th cranial nerve?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
is it the longest nerve in your body?
Yeah. And it's also called the wanderer. That's what it really means. And it migrates obviously from the brain all the way down to the gut, as Zach mentioned. And what's funny about that nerve is it's 70% afferent, which means that it's 70% returning gut to brain rather than brain to gut. So it actually has more of a connection. Like you're in other words, your brain has less of an influence on your gut than your gut has on the brain.
Right.
That's the weirdest thought. Like it's 70% gut to brain and 30% brain to gut. So a lot of like neurologists theorize that we're just elaborate vessels to carry around bacteria.
Yeah.
And so normalizing your gut bacteria, like, when we think about performance and we think about lifestyle and life extension and living healthy and the marathon of life, the MindBody Marathon of life, one of the key factors is basically understanding your gut health, because these are symbiotes. They're basically where they're supposed to be, helping us, and the more nefarious, more harsher bacteria we have in our gut, we're just not going to live a healthy life. And so that communication is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of brings me to my first question is, what's the best diet? Oh, this is a loaded one. Let's start with you.
Let's
go, Zach.
I would say, in my own opinion, I would say as close to like a paleo type diet as you can get. So meat, vegetables, fruit.
And why is that? In your opinion? It's fine. You can have an opinion. Yeah.
Because I think it's just overall, I think it's the it's the most well-rounded. You're going to hit everything that you really need in that. You're eliminating a lot of the processed, foods,
All of the process.
all of the processed foods.
Do you eat paleo?
Not all the time. So I'm actually seeing a naturopath right now.
What's your slip up?
What's my slip up?
Yeah.
Right now?
Yeah, like what would make it not paleo?
Oh, pizza. 100%. Oh, 100%.
Yeah, dude, it's a hard one to give up.
But like it's like we've had this conversation before where like, my naturopath that I'm seeing, he wants me like 90% to be gluten-free. And I also have like an overproduction of yeast in my body. And so I need to basically be paleo for, I don't know, a long time. Really?
Yeah, because the histamines from the yeast are
exactly
bad, but also the yeast survives
exactly
off carbohydrates.
Right.
Like simple carbs too.
Right. So like
not specifically fruit carbs. So people are like, well, there's sugar in fruit. Get out of here. Anybody that says that doesn't know what they're talking about.
Right.
Yes, there is, obviously, but
it's like pasta and like all that stuff.
That's not the same thing. Like you cannot say the sugar in a Twinkie is the same as the sugar in an apple. That doesn't even make sense.
How about wine?
It's grape. It's good.
Hey, if you're going to have an alcohol, I mean, that makes sense to be the primary one.
Is wine?
Yeah. That in my opinion. What about you, Matt? What do you think is the best diet? I know it's like a loaded question because it's just like it's so relative to what people's needs are.
Right.
But also we just get asked this blanket question all the time.
I don't think that there's one good one. I actually think a concept of like homesteading would be one of the best, where you actually produce your own food and like fruits and vegetables and stuff like that, because you know what is going into that product.
Homesteading.
Yeah.
We got Ron Swanson over here.
Well, not necessarily you have to be a homesteader, but I think
I've not actually heard that term ever come out of your mouth.
What kind of diet are you on? I'm on the homestead diet.
Well, yes, it's my own thing, but
so awesome.
But like, I think everybody should have a garden at home and produce their own vegetables.
Do you have a garden?
Yeah.
No, but I will be by next year.
Yes.
So
I used to have one.
Yeah, growing up, we had like a 60-foot by 40-foot garden.
Oh, seriously?
Oh, yeah.
What did you guys grow?
Garden. Everything. Corn, pumpkin, eggplant.
That's
multiple
awesome.
Varieties of tomatoes,
right.
peppers.
Well, if you're going to do a garden, you have enough room at your house, right?
Yeah, but we ain't doing it unless my mother-in-law does it.
Well, she'll do it.
Vovo.
I can do herbs.
Yeah.
Zach will be our herbalist.
Yeah.
But I just think having like natural food, that you're growing, one, you put the energy into it, so it makes you more like conscious of what you're eating. I know it's a great way to get kids involved in eating like vegetables and stuff that they normally are like, I don't want that.
It doesn't, that's the thing too. If you eat a strawberry or a pepper from a homegrown garden, it's markedly different.
It's so much
or even
different.
like a jalapeno or something like that. And it's definitely different.
Mm-hmm. But I think but like just then using your own ingredients to make stuff like, I'm Italian. Like I eat bread all the time. Well, not necessarily bread, but pasta. But like if I made my own pasta and made it with healthy ingredients, would be so much better.
Yeah.
Think of how many people go to Italy that have
celiac
or something, and they have no issues while they go there. It's just because they use literally the best eggs and the best wheat possible.
Well, and they don't use glyphosate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'd be putting that on my vegetables at home. So
yeah, so don't use Roundup, anybody. If you're going to do your home garden, don't be that guy or that gal that uses Roundup. Like, just do not do it. It's a forever chemical. It goes into the waterway. It messes with everybody. It's a terrible thing. I know it helps with the bugs, all this stuff, and it helps with the microbes. Forget about it. Like, just don't use glyphosate. Yeah, be an organic farmer, please, please, please.
But I think also then you're producing, less food than just being able to grow it at the, or get it at the grocery store. So then you're going to eat better portions and everything. So it's not necessarily one specific diet, because I can't say that there's one, because everybody has nutritional needs that are different. So.
I agree. So I've tried just about every diet. So I've actually I went through about 6 months of being vegan, many times going vegetarian. I've even tried the carnivore diet. I did it for about a month. That was a weird experience because I was traveling a lot at that time, and I would just go order a steak and that's it.
I think about your
multiple steaks. Actually, sometimes at dinner, I would order 2 steaks, and they're like,
I remember that.
"That's it."
I remember your keto adventure.
I went through
whenever
keto. I was like hard into keto for a while.
There was a point where you're like, dude, I'm losing a lot of weight, and I was like, what? And it's like one of those things where like I'm with you every day at work, so I don't see it, and then you basically were on your last notch of your belt, and I was like, dude, you are really skinny.
And I wasn't even running that much either. I was just like ketoing myself to death. But keto jacked me up pretty bad actually, because I was so hell bent on getting the fat in that I was consuming a ton of dairy, and that just talk about gut bacteria, man. Like that took me a while to balance out from that one. So I've tried all the diets, and I do agree with Zach. The one that makes the most conceptual sense to me is paleo. It's just like good healthy sources of meat, emphasis on plant sources, fruits and veggies, and then minimal, if any, grains, and so that would, for me, because I'm married to a Brazilian, it's in the form of rice, but that's it. So
how much rice do you eat?
We make it probably 3-4 nights a week.
Yeah.
It's probably a third of my daughter's diet. And the thing about a Brazilian diet is that they love garlic, they love rice, and they love veggies, and they love fruit. And like you go to Brazil and you wake up in the morning and, they ask you, what do you want for fruit? And then you go out to the tree and you pick it and you eat it. And then it's like, it's so natural. Talk about like, kind of farm to table sort of homesteading. And then they're all about rice and beans too. They have all this science behind like the connection of the bean to the rice and how it matches all the amino acids that you need, and it's kind of a complete protein. But in the most part, I feel better if I'm just strictly paleo.
Yeah.
I think too, when you're trying to pick a diet, if this is like your goal, picking it based off of like your mental fortitude, I guess. Like if you're pretty weak and like, oh, I don't want to work out today, and then you just kind of give up, like keto's not a diet for you, because if you do cheat, like it's the worst thing that you could do. Like you're supposed to cut out carbs and eat, meat and fat, or protein and fat and or vegetables, I guess. But
vegetables would be your only carbs.
The purpose of it is to not like eat glutinous like foods, and if you cheat, like it will like clog your arteries then, because
it's a little bit more dangerous. Yeah, because you are surviving on the fats, the sugars and the processed carbs are not getting processed in the same way as if you would, so it is a little bit more dangerous. That's why like cakes and cookies are so bad for you, because they combine the fat and the sugar. And then so your body runs through the sugar because it can't really consume or can't really store it. And so your body will then not be able to fully process the fat. So it either stores it or puts it in your arteries. So that's why those are like really terrible things.
Yeah. Well, and even to go off of you too, like I'm definitely more of a believer of like gradually work your way into it. Like I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty bad diet wise in the summer, like just eating just bad food like all the time.
Dude, you're a socialite, man. You're a social eater.
I am. I'm a social eater, but I don't have an emotional attachment to food. So like once someone tells me to do something, like I'm like, all right, yeah, cool. So once I went gluten free, it was like I'm not gonna like sacrifice a bunch of this stuff, but I'm gonna gradually start to eat the way that I want to eat. Well, then I went to the Browns game on Sunday and go Browns, because we beat the Ravens and it was an amazing game. Boom. But I decided to kind of go off the wagon a little bit.
Would you
I had beer, hot dog, like all of it, dude.
You had a beer after rim to rim to rim.
No, I didn't.
Oh no, that's right, you didn't.
No, because I couldn't think of it. I couldn't like stomach it.
You had a hamburger with a bun. That's what it was.
Yeah. And I think about that hamburger quite frequently.
We went to Wendy's, dude. That was our first. That's how like nutritionally desperate we were.
It was not good.
We went to Wendy's after that thing.
But dude, I got home and I was like anxious. I had a really bad headache. Like,
you mean after the Browns game?
After the Browns game. And I was like, dude, I can't do that anymore. Like, I don't want to feel like crap anymore. So it's like having those like little reminders once you go off the bandwagon of like, okay, this is the reason why I'm doing it.
Yeah. One time I've been gluten-free. Let me think about this. 14 years now. no, God, 16 years now. 16 years, 2008.
Before it was trendy.
Right. And it was the early days were hard. And a couple of times, I've just like willfully gone off the wagon on that one. And I remember one time we had worked Arnold Fitness Symposium, and which is like this powerlifting, elliptic lifting competition.
It's the second biggest sporting event to the Olympics.
Yeah, it's just phenomenal. It's a crazy event in Columbus, Ohio. So we worked it, and we were having a social gathering at a brewery, and they had food trucks outside. But the food trucks, I couldn't really have any of the food because they were all filled with gluten. So I'm like, all right, screw it. Let me just have a beer. So I had a beer.
I had a beer with him, so.
And oh my gosh, dude, the next couple weeks, like I was like thrown, it was bad. It was thrown out out of sorts. So, all right. So what, you got a question?
I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse because I feel like we've talked about it. Probably the biggest question that I get asked, heat or ice, but
heat or ice.
Yeah,
that's actually a really good one. Let's kind of delve into that.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you want to? You want to take it first or me?
Sure, I'll take it first.
All right. What do you say?
So general rule of thumb, just in my world, if it's acute, get ice on it just to calm down. But I know that that's a hot topic.
What does that mean?
Just to like sudden onset. So like if you sprain your ankle, you want to get home and maybe like just submerge your foot into something kind of cold to kind of calm down those pain receptors, maybe reduce a little bit of the inflammation. Now I know that's a hot topic these days because that new study just came out, which I have my own opinions on that. But then if it's more like chronic or like long-term, then you want to start getting heat to it.
So what do you mean by chronic?
So like something that's lingering more than, say, like 72 hours.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, I think like, if you, like we were in the Grand Canyon, right?
Right.
And 30 miles in, I spanked my knee on a rock. I slipped and fell, so my knee was twice the size as my right knee was twice the size of the left one. So I finished and took all the ice and just put it on my knee. I mean, it's like, I don't think that's a bad thing to do. I don't think I delayed healing of it. I think it just was getting the inflammation on the bursa sac and the bone, because it was a bone bruise. And, I think that's a fair thing to do. But I think Zach's right. Once you kind of get up to that 2 to 3 days out sort of a thing, even, 1 to 2 days of just kind of general icing on it, and then, move to heat, because then you're trying to stimulate blood flow. The reason why you're trying to get this, the reason why the ice matters is that when he was saying the proprioceptive response and calm down the nociceptors and just so you can move the joint normally. But the other reason is that, you're just trying to get the inflammation out of there. It's just like if you had a clogged drain and you can't properly clean the drain until you get it unclogged. So if you can get ice on there and just get the swelling out of there, then you can bring in fresh nutrients. And so I just think it's pretty easy conceptually. So that means that the vast majority of aches and pains that we feel actually do err on the side of heat. And I don't think you have to like go out of your way to like do like topical heat or anything, but it's just a matter of just warming up the area, just specifically not icing something. So say you have like chronically sore hamstring or a sore calf over time, just don't go icing those all the time. I just don't think it's a smart thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me is the biggest thing is just the red flag of make sure that there's no infection. Like, so if you don't have an open wound, you don't have a temperature.
You mean for heat?
Yeah, for heat. Yeah, you don't want to heat an infection. And if you do,
that is pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yeah. So the biggest thing would be is if you don't have a focal line of redness that is like tracing up almost where like a vein or an artery is, you should go to the hospital. If you don't have a low grade temperature, or there's not like an open wound where there's like pink or redness around it, I mean, heat. I honestly would probably still heat even before 72 hours, unless it like just happened. Like if you rolled your ankle, you hobble home, you get, do that. I think for me, most of the time, anytime that I've iced, anything after 24 hours after the injury hasn't really helped significantly.
Yeah.
And other areas too. Like I know, like for me, like if I try and ice my neck, like it just makes me tense up more.
Well,
So
yeah, that's about as chronic as it gets.
yeah. Well, yes, but I mean, like if I'm in an acute phase of that or something, like same thing, like small of the back, I just feel like a lot of people just tense up that tissue. So
Well, so
I try
that's
and
that's a good point.
avoid those areas.
So say you're not in the scenario of you spanked your knee on a rock in the Grand Canyon or you rolled your ankle, but you're in the scenario of you have consistent tightness in the back, and then one day it goes and turns to be acute. Well, I think even then, I think you're right. I think, you know, maybe, maybe ice it to just see if you can move a little bit better, like right kind of when it happens. But in the end, almost immediately, you do kind of want to err on the side of heat to bring blood flow to the deeper disc issue and some stuff like that. So if something is like, I guess what I'm saying is something is chronic and then turns acute for some random reason, then even heat you want to focus on. So that's what I'm saying. 95% of the aches and pains are going to be err on the side of heat.
Yeah. I mean, you can never really go wrong with ice other than if you put a cold pack like directly on your skin.
Right.
Because I've had 2 patients that have gotten frostbite.
Yeah,
from it.
frostbite.
But
falling asleep.
Yeah. So if you're unsure, you should, yeah. If you're unsure, then you should you should ice, just because you really don't do much damage, you know, with ice, whereas heat, I guess you could technically inflame it a little bit more. But I love if you, like in Leo's case, banged your knee, ice the knee, heat the quad, get circulation. It just creates a revolution.
Could have put your quad on one of those rocks in the Grand Canyon. It was so hot in there.
I know, 108 degrees.
Yeah.
Now I'll say this though. What do you think about this? So let's say you're treating somebody like low back disc. It's been ongoing for a long time, a couple weeks. You treat it. Would you have them, depending on how they felt after the appointment, have them ice to calm things down and then resume heat?
No. Some people, I would just honestly, people kind of know what works for them a lot of times. And I'll ask them, I'm like, have you tried icing it or heating it? And they'll often have an opinion, say, oh, ice really worked really well for me. Or, oh, I hate heat, or I love ice, or whatever, I love heat. They'll have an opinion on it. And I kind of just roll with that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they'll just be like, dude, ice is terrible for me, so I just heat it. And so, like, fine, then just heat it. Like, that's fine. To do your thing.
Psychosomatic.
Yeah, I'm not having a philosophical debate with them.
Yeah, I mean, you just get out of pain. Like we're here for you. Like, we're trying to put all this back together with you. And if you feel like that's the right move, we're not going to argue about it right now. Let's just do whatever you feel like is the right move. Our opinions are cast aside here, because if anybody's been in acute back pain, it's very ugly. It's not okay. And so we just got to calm down the waters as quick as possible. And so in that instance, I will kind of put the ball in their court and see what they prefer. Me personally, I would prefer if I acutely had a back issue and I know it's a disc and I know it's just like kind of inflamed back there, then I will err on the side of, for the first day or two, heat or ice, and then I will move to heat once it's moving better and that kind of thing. But that's just me personally.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say too, there was one time, I remember like the old clinic when my back flared up really bad. I had to get MRI. Well, there was like that one point where you treated me and you nailed nailed the progression of it. And so I get done being treated and then I go back to work. And then like halfway through the shift, I'm like, dude, I feel terrible. And you're like, yeah, we we stimulated it. We released stuff. Like, you're not going to feel great right now because we treated it. And then you said, like, if it continues to feel this way, throw some ice on it tonight. And then tomorrow start doing heat. And by the end of the night, I threw ice on it. But then in the morning, I felt way better. And then I did heat. And then I was like symptom free, or like the symptoms were greatly reduced by, the middle of that day.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times when you get treatment, you're kicking up a lot of dust. Right. So if you're going to remodel the bathroom, it's going to suck for a couple of days. Right. Like, it just is. You're going to get dust everywhere. It's hard. Like, it's traumatic. And then, once the dust settles, and icing would be sort of the moment when the dust is in the air. And then once the dust settles, you can get in there and clean it up and sort of repair everything. And that would be the phase of heat.
Right.
I think if you're going to heat, like a disclaimer would be, is if you're heating a joint, make sure the joint's stable. So like one of the worst things that you can do is like bend over in the shower and let the water just hit your back for a period of time.
Yeah, like
and then when you go to get up, like you're taking that disc and you're kicking it like to the next county over. And so same thing with like a knee. If you had an injury to the knee where there actually could be an instability of the knee, and then you heat it in an unstable way, meaning that it's not like, on a chair or like you're laying flat on the ground or something like that. You go to get up and move
or
it.
like it's hyperextended or something.
Because heat is really good at loosening ligaments and muscle. And then when you go more so muscle, and so when you go to move from that position, there's nothing stabilizing that joint anymore.
And that brings up a really good point. And this is one of the main things that I address in the Faster Without Fail book, is that like understanding where you're at on the spectrum of tightness. Like, how loose are your ligaments? How tight are your muscles? Like, these are components of everybody's on these spectrums. And it's important for you to understand like where you're at with the treble, with the mid, with the bass. And so you really get an idea of like genuinely what stimulus should you throw at it. So I said, for me personally, early on, I want to err on the side of ice because I have loose muscles and ligaments. And so I want to calm down the area. I don't want to loosen it up. I don't want to destabilize it. And then once I'm past that acute phase, then I'm going to err on the side of heat because I already have loose muscles and fascia. So I don't need to loosen them up even more when it's in an unstable position. So I feel like that's why everybody needs to sort of like track how they're feeling with it, because in a weird way, we might not know where we're at on the spectrum of looseness or tightness with fascia and muscle, but we know what works or doesn't work for us. And so you kind of just have to tinker with it. And that's why it's not an exact answer. It's just a matter of like, where are you at? Like, just like there's no perfect diet for any one person or any everybody in totality, but each person has sort of the best stimulus for them. And it's important to understand that.
Well, and I also think it's time dependent. Like if you're on a timeline, like if you're an athlete that has in 2 weeks, like, a major event coming up, you don't want to spend 2 weeks icing the injury on top of it, because it's going to slow down, some of the healing. So if we're treating a cross country runner and they've got, well, I mean, this week's states, but if 2 weeks ago they came in with an ankle injury, maybe ice the first time just to get the acute swelling down. And then after that, heat it, because I got to get it to heal as much as possible. Even if I don't think that it's going to heal 100%, if I can get you 60% healing by the time, that event comes down, you're going to be so much better than icing it. And could it calm down the swelling, but it also, you had no tissue repair done if you're icing 4 times a day for 2 weeks.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Do I have anything?
Give me a question.
So this is a massage question. So I always get this question, when is the best time to get a massage? Because we all know that getting a massage right before a competition is not good. And it's the biggest eye roll that I could ever give somebody.
That's a great question. I feel like I even addressed that a little bit on the race prep video, and episode we did. I think if people are used to getting soft tissue work, then it could be right up literally to the event itself. It could be literally that day they can even get some soft tissue work done. If somebody never gets a massage and they're not used to soft tissue work, then you probably want to be at least a couple days out from the event. That's my assessment.
Right.
And that's how I would operate personally, because even if I'm going to add in a new stimulus, I want to make sure that my body can handle it, and I at least want to give it a couple day gap. But if I'm used to that stimulus, I'll take it right up to the competition. So
I mean, we all 3 of us has worked at USA Track and Field, and like that's what we do. We like literally massage,
pre-warm up,
pre-warm up stuff.
Like I always tell people, like if you watch the Olympics and you watch the 100-meter final, like I'm genuinely not kidding. That athlete from the US has probably got treatment 5 times before that event.
I mean, I treated,
and I can't stress that enough. Like that is something that people don't understand. Like they probably literally had somebody physically work on them 5 different times that day.
Grant Holloway probably got 5 to 6 massages in the time that me, Clayton, and Coach arrived to the stadium this year at the Olympic trials, to the time that we left after Clayton ran the 800. he probably got 6 massages within that time. And we were there for maybe 2.5, 3 hours.
And this is one of the most annoying things to me, because whenever like distance runners come in and they're afraid of treatment, it's like, you have no idea. You're missing so much of the boat here, because sprinters, jumpers, throwers, they take advantage of it. And look at USATF and where they get most of their medals. Like, let's talk about that.
Right.
But then the distance runners are always like, no, I don't want any treatment. It's like, dude, we're not idiots. Like, yes, your average, PT or chiro, like, you don't want them working on you because they're probably not sports oriented. But if you have a sports person that literally has been in that setting, oh my gosh, you have to get treatment right up to that point. Like, it's so good for you.
I would say,
because we can scale, we know how to scale things appropriately.
Yeah. I would say probably half of the athletes that I treated at the trials, I probably saw at least twice a day, if not 3 times a day.
Yeah. 100%.
Right.
So, that's how, and that's part of it. That's one of the secrets actually of USATF. That literally is.
And as a patient,
well, what would you say? So let's answer your own question.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys nailed it. And what I was going to say, and I was going to elaborate on some of this. So like, as a patient, don't ever hesitate to ask questions, because as social media and as like our ability to be able to get media is really great right now. We can get on YouTube, we can find anything, we can find a full workout routine to get faster in the marathon. But I always say this, that if there's a lot of people in there that are knocking body work or whatever on like TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, it's probably because, and if these are professionals, it's probably because they're not confident in their own ability. And so don't hesitate to ask your provider their opinion on what they can do.
Okay.
We're gonna get the guns out now.
Dude, this is
I literally just had this conversation
this is my take on it though. If you are watching, said expert on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, whatever, and they are telling you that you don't need soft tissue work or you don't need any manual work, it's because, just think about this, they can't do that from YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. They can't physically treat you from there. They want you to have retention on their page. So they want to convince you psychologically that you can do the right exercises, you can do the right stretches, you can do the right activation, whatever. They're just going to sell you something. They're literally just going to sell you something. I have a YouTube page. That I show exercises to people. Like, I understand the monetary value of this. I understand the mechanics of this. I understand how the industry works. And when people say that, they are doing that because they don't want you to leave their page. They want to sell you their page and make you and convince you that you don't need other solutions. But all you have to do is just like, what did Tom Brady do when he was in his prime? Right. What does LeBron do? Right. What do these top level athletes do? They don't hire people to show them exercises. I can tell you that right now. Like, what exercise could you show LeBron James or Tom Brady in their prime that they're going to make them better? Like,
what
are you talking about? You need to physically treat them. Like, it's ridiculous. What exercise are you going to show Christian Coleman or Grant Holloway to make them faster? Like, are you stupid here? Like, just figure it out. Like, you have to physically release the muscle. You have to physically treat the muscle.
But you don't know double banded clamshells.
It's so stupid.
From the knee and ankle?
Dude, I mean, that's the thing. It's like you have to be in person and physically present with somebody to get them to that next level. Right. And you can't do that if you run a YouTube page, if you're, Ben Patrick, you just can't do that. Like, and I get what they're trying to do, but don't undercut what these like top end professional athletes are doing, and don't sell to these younger kids that that's not what needs to happen, because that's false. Because when they get to the next level, they're going to realize they missed a lot.
Right. Right. And they're getting fed a singular viewpoint. Yeah. Because there's more elaboration on.
Dude, I bet you those same people go out and get massages on their own and they just turn around and totally bastardize their own idea.
But then on top of that too, with it, so to kind of bring up, without going into too much detail, bring up something that happened to myself when we were at the Akron Marathon Expo. When we treat at the Akron Marathon Expo, we just do like leg flushes and stuff like that. It's a really fun time. But I kind of got burned because there was a runner that came in and didn't disclose to me until the end of the treatment that she that she saw a doctor and found that there was part of the hamstring coming off the bone. And well, I flared her up. And so when you go seek like pre-race massage or pre-race treatment, make sure to disclose everything before that treatment starts, because the way that I would have treated that would have been completely different. I probably wouldn't even have treated it, you know, or just done something completely different.
Yeah, basically just be, you know, if you're going to get body work done, like just be clear, you know, about what's going on. One time I went and got a massage in Naples at the Ritz-Carlton, and I had no idea who was going to massage me. I didn't say anything on the paperwork. I was just like, I just want to massage, whatever. So I just laid on the table, and then somebody walks in, and there was this like super strong, like Russian woman. And she just starts cranking on my calf, like just cranking on it. And I'm like super close to just tapping out.
It's a wrap.
And I'm like, I don't want to be that weak American. And this Russian woman's like all these weak Americans. But I didn't tell her what was going on, but I probably should have told her I had Achilles tear, because she was just smashing it with her fist.
Calf is so tight, and I just gotta.
And I would definitely.
And I'm like, this is not like this is not good. I was like biting the towel and everything.
But I would definitely say for anybody listening or watching, like massage isn't necessarily supposed to be painful. And I think that's a big misconception that like, oh, I got to have this super deep.
Well, you feel like nothing's being done until it hurts.
Well,
if a massage therapist says that they're a bulldog on the table, don't go.
Yeah. And I mean, we've all probably been there. And I mean, it almost ruined my senior states, like in cross country, because my girlfriend at the time bought me a massage package, and I was like, I'll just get in there. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I felt like dumpster fire until about like an hour before the race. And thank God that I just flushed my system and everything. But yeah, like a good massage therapist, and Zach can attest to this.
Dude, that's a heck of a high school girlfriend. Why are we just going to drive by that one?
Well,
like she bought you a massage.
Yeah, but it was at a hair
that's
salon.
Such like a
what is that, Great Clips?
That's such like a 30s 40s thing to do for your spouse. Like,
honey, you've been having a long day. I got you a massage.
Well, she got it for my birthday, and I saved it. I saved
so
it
amazing.
States, yeah. But no, it was off of Wise down in Canton, Y Street. But no, but the point that I'm making is that a lot of the times with treatment, less is more, and that actually leads me to my next question of why patients will ask, like, why we don't like adjust all the time, or why we don't specifically like go harder. And I would say just from that aspect of sometimes,
like, what do you mean by harder? By like
deeper
with our holds and stuff like that, and
like so, ART and adjustments and all that.
Yep. And so one of the techniques that all three of us use is active release technique. We all have training in it. We have certifications in it. And so active release technique, basically is developed to palpate the tissue and get to a certain depth. So if you have 3 layers, you have a top layer, middle layer, and bottom layer, and your middle layer is the one that's damaged, you're going to push down to that middle layer and then move the lower layer or the top layer, through a range of motion. And so you're pinning down that middle layer. And so a lot of the times, if you think of like deep tissue massage, and not, I mean, Zach would contest that, like, you can even go light with deep tissue massage. But if you're trying to mash, like if you are like, you go to your spouse, your significant other, and you're like, just get in there and crank, you're going to push through all 3 of those layers. And you're just
jamming tissue,
just jamming
just
tissue,
pinning it against the bone.
And so I wanted to bring up this, question that I get asked a lot, is because, a lot of times patients will leave, or not necessarily leave, but they'll be like, oh, he didn't really do anything, until they go out and then they start to like exercise and they're like, oh, I am actually better. Less is more, because if you go too hard, as Zach said with that, lady who, flared up her hamstring, like if he would have known that the tissue was damaged, he would have gone very lightly or not at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
well, I often say it's like when you're cooking, you can't take salt out.
No,
you need to be very sparing with your spices. And if you're adding salt and you add too much, done.
Yeah.
Like, good luck taking that puppy out. So treatment is like that. If we go after the generals and not the foot soldiers, we're being very strategic with our actions. And it oftentimes doesn't require a ton of pain and discomfort. Sometimes it does, but most often it doesn't. And it's because we're trying to stagger the stimulus. We're not trying to like overload the system in such a way that we are setting you back. We want you to be able to perform the next day. We want you to be able to get back ASAP to this. So that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, that's well put.
And I mean, I know that you've mentioned this beforehand in other podcasts and runs, and I don't know how many times I have to hear it, but it's one of those things where, like, like you've used the analogy of, well, why don't you adjust or something like that? And it's not necessary. And maybe your chiropractor beforehand, that was his only, tool in the toolbox. But it's like he's made the analogy of, well, why would you bring, like a Phillips head screwdriver to a socket, like bolt? Like you can sit there and twist it as much as you want. It's not
some providers only have like one thing they do or a couple things they do. So they only have a hammer and a screwdriver.
Right.
And then, if you need a wrench, well, they'll sell you on the hammer and the screwdriver, and they won't tell you need the wrench because they don't even know that. They don't even understand the concept that that's a thing. But you want to go to a provider that understands multiple levels of treatments and has multiple avenues to get to a different solution of improving the tissue quality and the injury. And then once you can do that, then you understand, like, okay, well, this case needs a Phillips. This case needs a hammer. This case needs a wrench.
I don't want this to be a plug for ART, but ART really taught me that. Like when I took their course back last January, like when we were learning certain moves for, let's just say like the calf, like the gastroc and the soleus, the depth to get to the gastroc was even more or less than what I thought. To like be able to actually like palpate it, get to it. And I'm like, oh, this is it. I was like, I'm going to save my arms and my hands tremendously because I'm not and again, like, I don't think you need to be super deep to be effective. Like, especially when it comes to massage, like if you're doing deep tissue, you don't need to be like, if they're not like cobra pose off the table, then we're not getting deep enough. It's like, no, like you can be effective in deep tissue without having to go deep. But even like with ART, it's like, wow, I'm still going too deep, for certain muscles. So like, it's like when you talk to your provider, again, ask questions. And like, typically I'll say like, well, when you know your anatomy and you know the depth of tissue, you're going to know what to do and you're going to know how deep to go.
Well, you just have to be results driven. And so if you're treating tissue and you're getting positive results and you're staggering your stimulus, meaning you're not going like in heavy handed and you're not being really aggressive early, and you're staggering your stimulus and you're getting the results you want, like, you as the athlete should be pretty thankful for that, because in the end, you don't have to take the next day off. You can hammer the next day. You can keep going. And that's the goal, because if you go after the general, you kill a lot less people, right? But you get the job done, and that's important. And so if you go after what's primarily the issue, you don't have to fight through all these other things for your body to recover with, because in the end, treatment is a stimulus. Running a workout is a stimulus. Lifting is a stimulus. Core is a stimulus. Lack of rest is a stimulus. Eating is a stimulus. If you make treatment too harsh of a stimulus, then that often will delay your progress in all the other stimuli you can throw yourself. So it's important for you to understand, like, it's not a matter of just like throwing a bunch of dry needles in there or hammering through the tissue. It's like, you got to be pretty segmented with this.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Any other questions?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. I got all of them. So I get asked all the time about what the best running shoe is.
Oh, this is a good one. So I would say it's always for now to the end of time, it's going to be the T7 Racer from Brooks.
Okay, I didn't mean that.
That's what I wear my marathon PR in. So
the T7 Racer. Oh man, I remember.
So okay, I think and obviously the whole shoe, heck, even by the time some people listen to this episode, it'd be totally changed. I think it's just all the studies show that what people feel like is the right shoe for them is the right shoe for them. I mean, it's just as simple as that.
That's what the most current research actually shows.
So if you try on a pair of shoes that your friend is like, you don't understand, you'll run to the moon with this thing, and you don't like it, that's
it's not going to work.
It's not going to work for you. You need to listen to your body. Like, it's just like, dude, I can't eat peppers. It makes me nauseous every time. Even if your friend loves peppers, you just can't eat peppers. Then it's like you can't force it. You wouldn't run a marathon eating peppers if it wasn't good for you. So like, why would you wear a shoe that doesn't feel right, even if everybody around you says it's right? So in this world of super shoes and this crazy banana shoe world, literally, it's got to feel comfy. It's got to feel like a glove. It's got to feel good connection to it. There's just so everybody knows, there's more nerve endings in your forefoot than your arch and your heel combined. So basically, if you're looking at a shoe, so there's more nerve endings in this portion of your foot than there is here and here combined. All right. So a lot of shoes nowadays will err on the side of loading that forefoot and it feels really, really good through here, but you need to make sure that's what your body likes. And a lot of times, like with these super shoes and these like carbon fiber shoes, it's basically one of those things where you put so much mass under your foot, you don't often feel the ground. So it's important for everybody to sort of understand that mechanics there. And for me personally, I like when I get into like a little bit more of the endorphin series from Saucony, because I can feel the ground a little bit better than when I'm in a Nike or even a New Balance or an Adidas super shoe. So that's just me personally. And so I think it's up to everybody to figure out. But I think there are some common principles to apply here.
That's where I was going.
So I think the principles are like, if you have some hip and knee issues, the research shows you should be in a lower drop shoe. So meaning a shoe that's kind of sitting like 4 to 6 millimeter drop or lower. That's the drop of the shoe, the heel to the forefoot. That's the drop, the slope. If you have foot and ankle issues, and I can attest to this because that's pretty much all I have these days, is Achilles issues, you want to be in a higher drop shoe because that shortens the Achilles and makes it not want to stretch as much. So Achilles, calf issues, peroneals, post-tib, plantar fascia, then a higher drop shoe decompresses that tissue and makes it a little bit more comfortable. This is not, it's not a bulletproof solution here. There will be outliers.
Yes.
There will be people who have plantar fasciitis that do not like high drop shoes. That's fine. I literally made the disclaimer. You should try what works for you. So if you put on a shoe and, basically you have a high drop shoe and theoretically it should help your Achilles and it doesn't, that's okay. You're an outlier. That's fine. You just need to try it.
So to comment on that, because I've suggested a ton of Achilles patients for a high drop shoe because it slacks the Achilles. It's like it theoretically should work. It doesn't. And the reason being is because a high drop shoe is typically heavier, and heavier shoes will make you heel strike, and heel striking will end up putting a lot of vibrational force through the Achilles. There's a pretty big research article that was in 2019 that showed anything that's above 285 grams per shoe has a likelihood of like something like 75% for you to heel drop because you don't have the strength in your tibia anterior to lift the shoe up properly. So you end up hitting the ground, heel first and then
like
rolling
in
through.
that check mark sign.
And so
Those clunkers.
In some cases for Achilles pain, you need to be more of a midfoot striker because you
Well, that was my point. Well, that was my point with the forefoot. Because most people don't have great nerve endings on, or everybody doesn't have great feedback from their arch to their heel. So they always think they're landing midfoot when they're not actually.
So shoe companies, if you hear this, you should design a high drop shoe that is lightweight and you'll save a lot of Achilles.
Yeah.
But do they want to do that?
Which is why I feel good running in carbon fiber, like lighter shoes, lighter weight shoes. So like that's like lighter race shoes. And so for my Achilles, those feel like the better option because I have good form. I have good mechanics of landing and the shoe is very light. And so, and I get decent feedback on that. Occasionally I run in a normal trainer, but for, 2/3 of my run are actually in carbon fiber race shoes for that reason.
Dude, I'm just in those old rugged regular Joe shoes.
Well, what do you wear? Do you wear your Chucks?
Yeah, I basically wear Chuck Taylors, size 12. So
you're a topo guy.
I'm a topo guy, but I'm turning into an ultra guy or an ultra guy. because so I like Topo, but Topo is just like kind of like your standard old like 2008, 2009 type shoe type trainer. So I like something that's a little bit more firm, something that like doesn't have a lot of cushion to it. I've always been that way. I like that it feels good. I feel like I'm more efficient. I don't feel like I'm landing on like a balance pad. And then with the Ultra, I didn't like it at first when I first got it. So it was like the trail shoe that I wore for the Grand Canyon. And it was kind of like a last minute decision to go towards it. But the reason being was every time that I would run longer than a 50K in my Topos, and even up to a 50K, my feet and ankles would be so sore. I had no issue on the Grand Canyon, not until like, the final little bit of the run, because you're just in the Grand Canyon and you're out there for 15 hours. So that one has a little bit more stack height, a little bit more cushion, but it's like firm, like medium type cushion. So it's not like super soft. So I'm definitely more of like, and I've always been the most successful in a 5mm drop shoe or less.
Yeah. See, that makes sense because
they stopped making my shoe in like 2012.
Oh yeah, because you're a pure guy.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense with your injuries, Zach, because you mostly had like, hip issues and back issues and stuff. So lower drop makes sense for him.
No, mine was actually Saucony before that. The Saucony Fast Twitch.
Oh, the Fast Twitch. That's right.
It was like a racing flat that had just a little bit of stability, but it was so light and it was amazing. Just with a little bit of stability, it felt so good towards the end of long runs.
I think people should have a variety of shoes they switch in and out.
Yep.
Absolutely. And so I don't think anybody's like, oh, dude, this is my shoe and I wear it all the time and I'm bummed they made a new version, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you need to be flexible, dude. Like, nobody eats the same exact meal every day. Like, you shouldn't run the same exact path every day. Like, you need variety. Variety is key. And I think the shoes are the same. The research shows you should have a different drop shoes, different stability patterns, different shoes for different surfaces, like all that sort of stuff. And that ups the arsenal of the amount of shoes you need. I get that, but I think that's critical to have that rotation.
Yeah, I know this past spring I tried to experiment a little bit more with going back, because I've traditionally in the last 10 years have ran more in lighter weight shoes. And I just feel like in high school, I used to just have like 14-ounce like
clunkers.
Yeah, clunkers. Not that I need to go that much, but like I would say a majority of my shoes are
good
probably,
for dodgeball.
Yeah,
or not dodgeball, but kickball.
Yeah.
Just those clown shoes.
But I would say a majority of my shoes are now all under 9.5 ounces, and so I purposely bought a heavier shoe to
How
kind
do
of
you know the ounce of the shoe? Like, that's so.
I buy and put on. I'm like, oh, it feels great.
No,
Let's go.
I'm a numbers guy, so I
Oh my
research all
God.
that. But there is something to say, especially now, like we talked about, like, super shoes, a little bit now and in previous podcasts. One of the things is what makes a super shoe good is not training it all the time, so that way you have the advantage of running in it come race day.
Yeah.
And so for me, for example, like I've been training in a more lighter weight shoe, I don't get that benefit then come race day. Whereas that's why I had kind of switched a little bit to training in a heavier shoe. So that way I got the advantage of training in a heavier shoe. And then come race day, I'm now lighter. What are your thoughts on
Yeah, I think once you hit on the race day, you want to pull out all the stops.
Right.
So if I didn't have an Achilles that was rotted out, both of them, then I would probably train normally in trainers and then just on race day wear carbon fiber shoes. But I know we had talked about this even with Megan on the show, Megan Featherstone. She basically is the same way. She has to run, a lot of times in carbon fiber shoes because of her foot and ankle.
It just feels
issues.
good.
It just feels good. And thankful that there were, engineers and researchers that figured that out, that can help people with poor tendon distribution in the lower leg. But if your hip, back sort of, irritation consistently is your stuff, your injury patterns, then you don't need to really be in super shoes consistently, and you should probably train in regular trainers, but err on the side of a lower drop and go from there.
I love that too.
Any other questions?
It makes me feel good.
Do you have any questions?
Not that I can think of.
Any more from you?
Yeah. Do you have any more?
Well, I didn't even ask one actually.
You asked
You had
one.
one.
You had one.
Wait,
Yeah.
what was it? Oh, diet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. All right. Well, let me just throw one out there. Is are flat feet bad?
No.
No. Well, define flat feet, because I would like.
Matt, you always go to the extreme. Like, we're not talking about like somebody that had like
Look at
surgical-
LeBron James,
No,
man. Look
no,
at
no,
look
no.
at LeBron
You're talking
James.
about
there-
Shaq and
you
his
can
toes.
have no. I the reason why I ask is because people just assume that their arches collapse in.
Everybody assumes that. Like,
Yeah.
literally, everybody's like, "Dude, my hamstrings are tight and my feet are flat." It's like, oh my gosh, no, you don't have flat feet.
So as long as you can put weight and you can hold a foot position, that's half of your battle right there.
Yeah.
And so people are
Well-
going to roll in more than others, but as long as you can hold, even if it's like this much difference, underneath, if you can slip 2 baseball cards underneath of that thing and hold that position.
Dude, are we talking the MVP ones or
Yeah.
what? Are we
Yeah,
talking the thicker
well,
ones?
yeah.
We gotta get Clayton in on that one.
Yeah. Let me. All right, two what are jersey cards? But no.
That's-
Jersey cards.
Look, I think most of your world-class sprinters have flat feet
Yes.
I would agree.
because a structure that is flat can't move.
Yeah.
Right. So they start flat and they end flat. So if your foot is flat to flat, meaning it's flat when you're sitting there and not touching the ground, and it's flat when it's touching the ground, that's okay. That's fine. If your foot has an arch to it when you're just sitting there and it's not in contact with the ground, and then you put it in contact with the ground and then the arch collapses to a flat foot, that is a flexible foot. Then you should probably be smart about exercises or potentially orthotics or something to help that out. That is actually pretty uncommon. Most people have somewhat of an arch, and then when they stand up, they still have somewhat of an arch. That's pretty common. So that's like 2/3 of the population. And there you really don't need support. You really don't need much of anything. You just need to keep the ankle and foot strong and just kind of go from there and just get in the right shoe that feels right for you, hence the theme earlier. But flat feet is not bad, and
No.
not everybody has flat feet. I'm sorry. Like
Yeah.
most people think they have flat feet. They don't have flat feet.
You just have low arches.
You just have lower arches. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
And it's don't let some podiatrist or don't let these orthotic companies or let these Instagram ads convince you that orthotics are going to fix it. There's no quick solution in this earth. Like there's just not. Like you probably don't have a flat foot, and even if you did, it probably is an advantage. So just keep that in mind. What we need to be concerned with is if you're looking at, if people are watching, if you're landing and then your ankle bone rolls over your arch, meaning that creates what we call navicular instability or a navicular drop test, then that means that yes, you actually probably have a little bit of a pathologically mobile arch. And in that situation, it would be better off to potentially stabilize it. But these are pretty clear. Like, people are walking on the inside of their shoes and their shoe patterns are really weird.
They're blowing out the inside of their shoe.
They're blowing out the inside of the shoe. They literally look like they're walking on their ankle bone. I mean, let's be real here. They probably need some support, and let's just be smart about that. They need a wider platform, stability shoe, but that is not the average person. The average person is just a little bit flexible arch and not a flat foot.
It just make me think of those like off-brand UGG boots that like the girls used to wear in high school, and they would just be like just sideways.
I know, dude. Just no support and just wearing it.
But I think if you're a beginning,
Just salt lines on the inside of the shoe.
It's always during the winter.
I think if you're a beginning runner, like you might need a stability starting out because you just haven't built up like the foot and leg strength. But then I would encourage any runner, no matter where you're at in your career of running, to reassess, because I have so many people who they were just the first shoe that they were put in. They were in a stability shoe. They were in a GT 2000 or
Yeah,
something.
Asics.
And then they just, that was it, and it felt good initially, and now they're coming in and they have hip or knee because they've built up the strength over years of running, and they don't need that stability shoe. So if you haven't been reassessed or anything like that, I mean, you don't have to go and get professionally fitted or anything like that, but you should literally just look in the mirror and take a look at, I think it was Running Warehouse or Roadrunner Sports, one of the two, I can't remember. They used to have like an online thing to just like click on to see if you needed a stability shoe, and it was a pretty legit thing. Like it had you walk, and walk on paper with like a wet foot and see your arch pattern. You had to measure like two things. Could you do a squat, like close legged and regular squat, and then based off of like 6 questions, it would help you determine if you need it. And it was a good exam, like from something online. Go online and go and go to that website and find it,
or do some of the exercises or
Yeah.
examples from the book.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we address that in the book too.
And so at that point, because like I said, like when I came off of 2 or 3 years of not running, I put myself with a small little insert for the first 6 months, and then after that, I had the strength again to be able to get out of it. And I wouldn't even consider being in a stability shoe now.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I think rather than like shutting people down and building up, especially if they can still run, but like if they have an instability, like give them that little bit if they need it. Again, hone on the exercises, get them stronger, and then you can graduate out of it.
Yeah, it takes roughly 4 months to stabilize through the bone. It takes roughly 1 to 2 months to stabilize through the fascia. It takes roughly 2 weeks to stabilize through the muscle. And so these are decent adaptations. So if you're kind of just getting starting with running, it takes kind of a while to get used to it and kind of a while to build up the tolerance in the system. And I always say running is a rich get richer sport. And the more you're doing it, the easier it becomes, the more you do it. And so it's just one of those things where, if you're kind of just getting back into it or wanting to get active, like just be patient with your body and, try to protect and stabilize it as much as you can. And then as you get stronger and as you get more confident and as your body gets a little bit more adapt after weeks to months, then you can segue out of stability, segue out of orthotics, and then kind of, essentially walk on your own 2 legs. Cool. Well, I think that's kind of a good wrap to the episode. So thank you for listening. We'll put up some good images and stuff like that throughout the YouTube video. So anybody that was listening, feel free to visit the YouTube page. And hopefully this was a good episode and you can submit some questions too. We'll do another Q&A in a couple months and kind of go from there.
It was fun.
Yep.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Dr. Leo here. If you want to catch me in another setting, be sure to check out my YouTube page, Running Rehab, where you will find exercises on how to stay healthy with running, how to improve your running form, and a bunch of other tips and tricks on how to get over common injuries. So again, Dr. Leo here. Be sure to check out my new book, Faster Without Fail, Your Guide to Overcoming Injuries and Running Faster Than Ever. It is now available on Amazon. You could read reviews on the Amazon. You can check out what other people have said about it. But basically, if you want to revolutionize your running form and better understand how to stay injury-free within the sport, this is your guide. Feel free to reach out and let us know what you think of the book. I would love to hear your feedback. But again, please check it out on Amazon. Faster Without Fail. Appreciate it.